As a tween, what I wanted more than anything was to be popular. I actually wanted a friend group, but I was reading a lot of Sweet Valley High at the time, and I think I just conflated it. I was quiet and sensitive, and I struggled with making friends. I was one of those kids that kind of drifted from group to group, de facto ending up with a group of kids that nobody else wanted to hang out with. We weren't friends because we liked each other per se, but because we were the leftovers and we couldn't each have a whole cafeteria table all to ourselves. I desperately wanted to feel liked and normal, like the regular average teens at Sweet Valley High. But by sixth grade, I was starting to tentatively form friendships with some kids who I actually liked. They were from my competitive creative problem-solving team, Destination Imagination. But it was basically like being popular. I had to play my cards right so we'd become real friends. And in 1999, that meant having an AIM screen name to instant message. Only my parents wouldn't let me get one. While most kids flew under the radar, their parents completely unaware of what was happening online, mine knew way too much. My dad started a software company in 1985, 3 years before I was born. It was the proverbial startup in the garage story, and while he's not Steve Jobs, his company does still exist today. So I had a computer in front of me from birth. It almost felt like a second sibling. Some of my earliest memories involve being shown floppy disks as if they were a cool toy. I was taught that the moment something is going wrong with a computer, you have to reboot. The way my dad said it had such drama, he made it sound like an event. He helped develop an early version of the internet called Gopher. It was a text-only DOS program that could be updated in real time by anyone with a software like Wikipedia for super nerds. It was really popular for a minute, and that minute was when I was about 4 years old. If I asked a question about basically anything, like why is the sky blue or whatever, he'd say, "Let's go ask Gopher," and we'd go find the answer, usually in more detail than I wanted to know. My dad knew everything about computers, spent so much time trying to get me excited about them, and then all of a sudden, when I really needed them to come through for me, I was denied. My parents absolutely would not release me into the vast unknowability of cyberspace. They didn't want me to chat with strangers. I begged. I said, "Come on, Dad, I'm 11. I don't care about strangers. I just want to nurture the tenuous friendships I'm building right now and feel like I belong among my peers." Or something like that. Just kidding. Nobody in my family is that self-aware. My dad heard me, and he's an innovator, so he came up with a creative solution. He wrote me a chat program.
Oh my God.
My own private Gopher. I just had to get all my friends to install the program and talk to me on there. Perfect. Problem solved. I recognize now that this is an incredibly sweet thing to do. I mean, it's the love language of a robot, but still, it's sweet. But at the time, it was the most mortifying thing I could possibly think of. I didn't trust that my actual friends liked me, much less these popular kids I was trying to talk to. Didn't my dad understand middle school social politics at all? I couldn't speak a word of this to anyone. Finally, by the end of middle school, I learned that there was a box you could check on the AIM settings so only people on your friends list could message you. I showed this to my dad and he immediately said, "Sure, fine, go ahead." High school really was the glory days of AIM. By then, I had friends, a whole group of them. I saw them all the time at school, at rehearsals, at the coffee shop, and then when I went home, I'd sit in my dad's study and do homework until 3 a.m., procrastinating on papers while we chatted even more. I could feed my sense of self-worth around the clock. And when I was very lucky, I'd get an ion from my crush, singing Hamster 00. Singing Hamster 00 was my friend, a fellow theater kid whose role model was Holden Caulfield. He was condescending, usually annoyed with how I lacked confidence in everything, which obviously made him irresistible. We'd IM each other late at night, an activity that was always fraught and full of stress for me. He was hot and cold, sometimes eager to communicate and sometimes distant, which was exactly the kind of love I craved. When a conversation was particularly juicy, I would print it out and save it with all my diaries. This applied to romantic intrigue, but also gossip, funny conversations with my friends, anything that I felt must be saved and preserved. Proof I had a social life. I wanted this communication to be tactile, real. IRL, singing Hamster 00 was my first kiss. I was 17, If you couldn't tell by everything I've said up till this point, I was a late bloomer. We skipped school together after an IB test and went to a coffee shop, and then back to his mom's house to watch Finding Nemo in the basement. Gradually inching closer and closer to each other on the couch until he looked at me and said, "Julie, you are very beautiful." As if it was something he had read about in a teen book. And then he pounced. Felt like all my dreams were coming true. The next time I saw him, he acted like nothing had happened. Like he'd been rebooted and his memory hadn't stored the experience. When I eventually asked him about it, he said he just wanted to know what kissing me was like. So Holden Caulfield. I shoved it down and pretended it didn't bother me. I blamed myself for not being more compelling, more Sweet Valley. We were going to separate colleges anyway. My first year of college, some guy in my honors English lit class IM'd me one night. I'd unchecked the box by then. I was an adult. I couldn't figure out how he'd gotten my screen name. We had truly never spoken. He would message me late at night with invasive messages full of sexual innuendos and weird ones. And then he'd ignore me in person. I wasn't interested in him. He never suggested actually hanging out anyway, so either he just liked the virtual chase or he just wanted to make me uncomfortable. And I was uncomfortable. But somehow it never occurred to me that I could just ignore his messages. I let this go on for months, long after the class ended, before it got really bad and I realized that I could block him. The problem went away, but my icky feeling about it persisted. AIM had a way of being anonymous, even if you knew who was on the other end of the chat. We appeared to each other as plain text and screen names, just a little impersonal. Our imaginations ran wild, trying to construct a picture of the other person on the other side of the screen. Now it sometimes feels like the virtual versions of ourselves are even more lifelike than we are, like our avatars precede us. And some things have not changed, though. It turns out that I also wish I could set my dating profiles to only show me people I know. But unfortunately, as an adult, I am supposed to go out and meet strangers I found on the internet because it is evidence that I am trying. I spend a lot of energy trying to turn myself into a computer. Logical, unfeeling. But computers are people? They're a reflection of us. We can't get away from our own fundamental humanness, even if we filter it through screens. They don't filter away our shame or rejection or general ickiness. They store it, whether or not we print out the chats. Thank you.